34. The wagon bobbed and shook down the country road. Traveling via land wasn't the fastest way to arrive anywhere in Udos, but Cal figured it was their best chance of getting to Sanctum Spire unhindered. Since the Davan Empire had tightened its grip on the Uden people, both figuratively and literally in some cases, refugees from all the major cities had started making their way to the realm's central city. At first, Cal had been worried their faces would be recognized by checkpoint guards or the other travelers, but the journey had been uneventful. Only three such checkpoints stood between Igni and Sanctum, the sprawling city that ringed Sanctum Spire. He would have found this suspicious, save for the wagon driver explaining that Sanctum had been targeted by a number of terrorist attacks in recent months, and although the city was on high alert, the constant stream of refugees meant cheap labor. This logic struck Cal as flawed. More refugees meant more risk of rebels slipping through, exactly what he and Ovette were attempting to do. Still, he wasn't about to question their good fortune for once. They'd need every scrap of it before the day was out. The driver himself was as nondescript and crowd blending as they came. A more suspicious person might have taken his appearance as crafted, intentional. But Ovette had assured Cal that he was just too used to seeing the worst in people. She'd paid the driver up front with what little money they had saved from their hideout and the few coins that were left in the orphanage. It had been enough to secure passage to the city walls, but beyond that, they were on their own. At least they rode alone. Crates of food and an array of closed barrels were their only companions. That would make things easier if the wagon were stopped and searched. "We're really doing this, huh?" Ovette said, her head rolling in step with the wagon's slow trot. "We're really about to take the fight right to Cius's front door." "What other choice do we have?" Cal replied, leaning back and looking at the passing scenery, trying, and failing, to enjoy the calm before the storm. The looming threat of danger never too far off. "Do you remember anything from your time there?" he asked, still not breaking his gaze away from the peaceful countryside. "I remember feeling like I was being watched, all the time. The dread's presence was constant within the spire, similar to how I felt around the chains, only much worse. Like its presence was physical, oppressive." Ovette fell quiet, and Cal turned his gaze back into the wagon. "Well, at least we know we're heading in the right direction," he said, the reassurance he'd intended to convey falling flat. Ovette dropped her gaze and breathed. "Cal, are you going to be all right near Sanctum's chain? The dread, it might try to take control of you again." The thought had occurred to him, but he might be the biggest danger to this little suicide run of theirs. Part of him questioned why they were even making this journey. Ovette had used her gift in Igni, healing him, aiding Leif in his passing, and the Lord Inquisitor hadn't sent in his hunters. It was as if they were no longer worth taking note of, no longer a threat. "Do you remember when we first found our secret spot?" The question caught Ovette off guard, clearly not the answer she had been expecting. "I do," she said, recovering and leaning back against the wagon's side with a faint smile. "You were running away from Lady Havisham. I can't remember why, but I do remember you jumping at every shadow, thinking she was going to leap out and grab you." "I remember you, crying when I told you I was going to run away. You begged me to stay. Told me if I just said I was sorry, that she'd forgive me. Made me promise to always tell the truth." The memory tugged at the corners of his lips. "Really does feel like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?" "Who would have thought we'd end up here? Criminal stowaways in some beat-up wagon." "You grow up to be a criminal?" Ovette smirked, Never would have guessed. Cal laughed, the sound rough and real, coming from his center. He tilted his head back, his gaze drifting toward the horizon, to the new chains that speared distant ground. We caused this. His smile faded, the weight of the view dragging in his voice. For 8 years, killing was all I knew. I was so obsessed with surviving, so driven by my need for revenge, that I never stopped to consider the lives of those around me. Lives that were barely worth living. Udens, Hollowborn and Giftling alike, stumbling through each day, hoping to stay invisible, following without question, never knowing that they too deserved a choice that Cius and the chains took away from them, that I took away from them. I can't atone for what I've done, from the person I became in my need for vengeance, but I'll not turn a blind eye to their suffering any longer. It's my responsibility to clean up my mess. I won't lie and say I'm not afraid, but whatever happens, we'll handle it, Ovette finished. Cal looked at her. Together. Ovette's smile ran up to her eyes. I'm proud of you, Cal. A warm blush prickled his cheeks, but he laughed it off. You're starting to sound like Leif. So are you. Cal turned his head back to the horizon. No, I just don't feel like running anymore. The jostle of the wagon shook Cal awake. Lamplight bled through the tarp drawn over the wagon's frame. Night had fallen, though he didn't remember falling to sleep. Ovette's head rested in his lap, her breathing calm and slow. He nudged her awake as the cart rolled to a stop. She stirred, blinking and rubbing away the remnants of sleep, recognition dawning across her features. We're here, called the wagon driver. Cal pulled back the section of tarp that separated them from the driver's seat. He opened his mouth, readying his question, but the sight of the city stunned him into silence. The innards of Sanctum City sprawled before him. Uniform white blocks of all different sizes were placed on top of one another. Dim light shone through some of the walls' small black holes. Were they domiciles? Warehouses? There was no way to tell. This is as close to Sanctum Spire as I can get you. The driver jerked a thumb toward a broad causeway that bisected the structures, large enough for a fleet of wagons, or citizens to travel in both directions. Afraid you'll have to walk the rest of the way. Sanctum Spire rose beyond the causeway. Its surface was etched with the same runes that marked the chains anchored into its flanks, runes that glowed in unsettling unison. Armor clinked at the base of the spire, Sanctum's prefects ready to meet this lone wagon. Cal and Ovette climbed out of the wagon and stared at the driver, their confusion written clean across their faces. The man smirked with an untrustworthy grin. Lord Dredge says good luck. Before Cal could respond, the driver spurred on his horse and the wagon lurched away. A voice barked from the gathered prefects. Curfew's in effect. All citizens are to return to their homes immediately. The voice rang with command. Not a warning, a threat. Cal slid Hollowborn free from its sheath on his back and turned around to greet them. Ovette lined her hands with flickering white flame. You know who we are, Cal called out, making sure his words were loud and clear. You know why we're here. Let us pass, and no harm will come to you. Ovette edged closer to Cal. The causeway offered little in the way of cover. Cal recognized the long wooden weapons that a few of the lead prefects held. Disc, barrel, and consequence. His heart thumped as the seconds dragged by. He stepped forward, holding his weapon out to the side, arms open. Ovette followed, matching his pace. The guards didn't react. The tension between them held. Cal took another step forward, and then another. Soon they were walking forward at a slow, cautious pace. Long gift arm barrels trembled in the prefect's grips. Their brands flickered with uncertain command. Their swords remained snug in their sheaths. It wasn't hatred or a sense of duty that kept their weapons up. It was fear. The prefects parted as Cal and Ovette drew closer, allowing them to pass through. Cal braced for a knife in his back, for one of the prefects to tip over the edge. But they didn't. They watched, hollow-eyed, as Cal and Ovette reached Sanctum Spire's towering doors. Are you ready? Cal kept his gaze on Ovette, but tracked the crowd in his periphery. Ovette's fists were clenched in grim resolve, and something malicious flashed across her features. I'm ready, she answered, the words cold and hard. Cal knew that look all too well. It had stared back at him for nearly a decade. With a final breath, Cal placed his hands on the doors and pushed.